high above the Holy Land. At 9,230 feet, this mysterious mountain straddles the borders of Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. Sitting above the Golan Heights, Mount Hermon has been contested ground among Christian, Hebrew, and Islamic faithful for thousands of years. According to the Synoptic Gospels, Mount Hermon is the location of the transfiguration of Jesus, an event in which Jesus was transformed into a radiant, altered state and was seen to be conversing with Moses and the prophet Elijah. Mount Hermon is also the site where the 200 fallen angels descended to earth in the book of Enoch. But why Mount Hermon? Is there a geological significance to that site?
All across the face of the earth there are particular hot spots. And it could well be that the reason the Middle East is such a hot spot, and the reason there are legends that the Middle East contains stargates, portals to other universes. One theory says that we were populated from the stars in the Middle East at the beginning of what we call our own time.
In the occult science of numerology, the number 33 represents the ultimate attainment of consciousness. Mount Hermon is located at the 33rd parallel north, which is a latitude 33 degrees north of the Earth's equator. Tracing the 33rd parallel to the exact opposite side of the globe directly points to the site of the most famous alleged UFO encounter in modern history, in Roswell, New Mexico.
If you take the geographic polar opposite from Mount Hermon, you wind up in Roswell, New Mexico. Now that's not an accident, folks. It's not an accident. Fallen angels are very big on where they show up, what they do, how they do it. That should send shivers up and down your spine.
But could the global coordinates of the Roswell crash site and those of Mount Hermon have a special, perhaps secret significance?
If aliens use the 33rd latitudinal line as a waypoint, as a landing point for planet Earth, what biblical people saw thousands and thousands of years ago on Mount Hermon were entities that came down from the sky. They called them angels.
Could the angels that descended on Mount Hermon thousands of years ago and the aliens who were reportedly seen over Roswell, New Mexico in 1947 belong to the same extraterrestrial race? And if so, does this mean that angels or aliens have been among us all along? Were they left behind to monitor us? Or perhaps even guide us into the future?
I believe that what this country set out to do was something that was going to be done sooner or later.
We find for the first time that man has the flexibility or the option of either walking this planet or some other planet. It's a beginning of a new age.
After Apollo 11, NASA would send 6 more manned missions to the moon, culminating with Apollo 17 in 1972.
One of the most interesting questions with regard to our interaction with the moon is why we have never gone back there again since the Apollo missions. And what else is very telling is that although the USSR at the time was getting to be quite able to send its own astronauts to the moon, it never seems to have done so. Could it be that there were agencies associated with the moon, aliens or other beings who had warned humanity?
I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Neil, out of me, that's
don't remember seeing any. Neil, you were, I 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 don't remember seeing any. Neil, you were...
Hey, out of me, that's nuts.
The Zoo hypothesis is an attempt to answer the Fermi paradox, which is named after physicist Enrico Fermi. This paradox details the contradiction between the lack of evidence and high probability estimates for the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations. The Zoo hypothesis is named as such as it suggests that all life on Earth may be similar to that of an animal zoo with the same principle of look but don't touch. This would mean that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations are advanced enough to know of our existence but don't attempt to make contact with our primitive civilization. However, there is another theory that proposes something similar but is far more mysterious and could be considered somewhat unsettling. Now, apart from the Zoo hypothesis, two popular theories exist which try to explain the origins of how mankind came to be. They are known as creationism and evolution, and while they may be the most widespread theories, there is another, less known, but still highly discussed. That is, the idea that humanity's inception as intelligent beings is as a result of extraterrestrial genetic manipulation on a less advanced mankind during our ancient past. Understandably, this theory may sound far-fetched, but researchers such as Zacharias Sitchin believe that humanity had been genetically engineered to work as slaves in our ancient past. The incidents, facts, and speculation throughout this video may make you question your understanding of reality and history. It's important that you go into this skeptical, but also with an open mind. Now, here are a couple of quotes from Sitchin to illustrate his beliefs and the places that his research took him. Those who from heaven to earth came, they landed on Earth, colonized it, mined the earth for gold and other minerals, establishing a spaceport in what today is the Iraq-Iran area, and lived in a kind of idealistic society as a small colony. They returned when Earth was more populated and genetically interfered in our indigenous DNA to create a slave race to work their mines, farms and other enterprises in Sumeria, which was the so-called cradle of civilization, in outdated pre-1980 school history texts. They created man, Homo sapiens, through genetic manipulation with themselves and ape man, Homo erectus. According to this theory, it is thought that gods, or rather extraterrestrials, known as the Anunnaki, are the beings responsible for this reported manipulated evolution of mankind. The Anunnaki, which means those of royal blood, are believed to be immortal gods that inhabited the earth during the ancient Sumerian times in Mesopotamia. The Sumerian civilization developed on the Persian Gulf, growing to strength at around 4000 to 3000 BC. The territory was named the Plain of the Land of Shinar, which after 2000 BC became known as Babylon. Interesting to note is that it was actually the Greeks who eventually named Mesopotamia, most of which lies in the modern-day state of Iraq. The Sumerians were the first recorded civilization of mankind and possessed an advanced understanding of mathematics, language, and astronomy. Bizarrely, however, no evidence exists of this knowledge evolving over time as you might expect. This knowledge seemed to just simply exist and is written about as being brought by the Anunnaki gods who, and I quote, came from the stars. The advanced Sumerians are credited with establishing our modern-day calendar, and they were also aware of the cycles of the sun, moon, and other visible planets. They also accurately knew the exact length of a year, which is beyond strange for their time period. They seem to have an extraordinary fixation on astronomy for some unknown reason. Unless, of course, it is assumed that they were taught of the importance of such subjects by a force that has been long lost to history. It's also important to note that the Sumerians were the first civilization to divide space and time by factors of 6, meaning that they were the first to introduce the 12-month year, 24-hour days, 60 minutes in an hour, and 60 seconds in a minute. I find it extraordinary that this timekeeping method was devised such a long time ago and hasn't needed to be improved upon since. One way or another, the Sumerians sure seem to be ahead of their time.
The Sumerians also created what is known as the King's List. This inscribed tablet chronicles the rule of beings that lived incredibly long lifespans. Scientists today deem the list to be a work of fiction, since humans cannot live the length of time the tablet described. Skeptics of that conclusion, however, suggest that the tablet was not a work of fiction, but was an ancient civilization's attempt at documenting their history. The King's List begins with the original Anunnaki supreme rulers' descent from the heavens in what they call the kingship. This list then proceeds to detail all of the following Anunnaki rulers and notes for how long they ruled. Strangely, the list documented that the first ruler held power for 1,200 years, while many of the other rulers held power for hundreds of years at a time. Other rulers, of course, ruled for less. The average amount of years spent in power was around 30. Obviously, at this stage, only one of two conclusions exist for this list. Either it was a work of fiction, and therefore not true, or instead was an attempt at documenting the rule of beings that came from somewhere else. The King's List documented 433,000 years of Anunnaki rule, which means that these gods or beings were on Earth for a much longer period of time than the recorded history of all of humanity's recorded civilizations on Earth combined. Interesting to note is that other religious texts also speak of people or beings living extraordinary amounts of time, similar to the list. The original homeland of the Sumerians is unknown, but it is believed that they came from the east. Their mode of travel is unknown, however. Historians have been able to deduce that they were not local to the area because their language belongs to an isolated language group, meaning that it was not native to the area. Something else that is fascinating about the ancient Sumerians is that they seem to be aware of the importance of Pleiades, which is an open star cluster containing middle-aged, hot B-type stars located in the constellation of Taurus. They detailed their understanding of this cluster in a cylinder seal artifact, which according to legend, this is where the 7 great gods gathered together. Not only that, but the Sumerians understood that the morning setting of Pleiades was used to mark the beginning and end of the agricultural year. Bizarrely, however, despite creating an artifact detailing this star cluster, there are no known records of the Sumerians having knowledge of any more than 5 planets in our solar system, leaving experts baffled. Now, as mentioned earlier, Sitchin believes that the Anunnaki genetically engineered modern humans by use of genetic manipulation and crossbreeding with Homo erectus. The results of this reported manipulation were named the Nephilim, which are reported to be offspring between Anunnaki and human beings. Now, if all of this isn't strange enough, let's get even more bizarre. According to Sitchin's interpretation of Sumerian cosmology, there is a hypothetical planet which follows a long, elliptical orbit reaching the inner solar system roughly every 3,600 years. This planet supposedly collided with another planet that used to exist in our solar system called Tiamat, which resulted in the creation of Earth. Strangely, Caltech researchers have found mathematical evidence based on gravity to suggest that there may be what they dub a Planet X deep within our solar system. This hypothetical, Neptune-sized planet would orbit our Sun in an extremely elongated orbit far beyond Pluto, which was also predicted by Sitchin. According to Caltech researchers, this planet could have a mass of around 10 times that of Earth and would orbit around 20 times farther from the Sun on average than Neptune. This would mean that it would take between 10,000 and 20,000 years to make one full orbit around the Sun. How the Sumerians had knowledge of this suspected planet is unknown, and Sitchin goes on to state that before the collision, this Planet X, or rather Nibiru, was home to an advanced human-like race called the Anunnaki, according to Sumerian documentation. Now, Sitchin goes on to state that eventually something terrible happened and war broke out between various extraterrestrial factions on Earth, and he believes that fallout from nuclear weapons was the evil wind that destroyed Ur around 2000 BC. He also notes that his research coincides with many biblical texts and argues that the biblical texts originally come from Sumerian writings of their history. The obvious question then is, does any evidence at all exist of some sort of nuclear fallout or war during ancient times? Bizarrely, the answer to that might be yes. Let's explore another element of the theory. That is, the idea that extraterrestrials have manipulated our DNA in the past to create modern-day humans. It is said that evidence may be found to support this theory in what is known as the RH factor. The RH factor is an element of the four major blood groups which are determined by the presence or absence of two antigens, A and B, on the surface of red blood cells. In addition to the A and B antigens, there is also a protein known as the RH factor which can either be present or absent, and this creates the 8 most common blood types. Most of the population are RH positive and only 15% do not have the RH factor. The absence of this in some people has caused a major headache in the scientific community, and its absence remains a mystery. Now, this is where things get strange. Some people believe that the RH factor stems from an extraterrestrial origin, and it is claimed that most people who have experienced some sort of missing time or abduction are RH negative. The discoveries of the RH factor and the various blood types were an amazing discovery for science, but it has revealed an anomaly according to some researchers. A strange effect of being RH negative that only occurs in humans is that when the mother is RH negative and the father is RH positive, the resulting baby is more likely to be RH positive as it is the most dominant factor. However, the RH positive baby has the potential to trigger antibodies in the RH negative mother, causing the body to attack the foreign blood cells of the baby. In addition to this finding, it has been noted that RH positives share the trait similarity with other species, specifically apes. This RH positive bloodline can be mapped through time and evolution. RH negatives, however, cannot, which begs the question, where did it come from? Over the years, theorists have claimed that this finding points to extraterrestrial ancestors and the merging of two distinct DNAs. Theorists have also made an attempt to explain the missing link, which is an informal term used to describe a transitional species that connects two together, such as apes and humans. Author Greg Braden has explored missing links in some depth and suggests that human DNA shows unmistakable signs of planning that evolution alone cannot explain. In addition to that, he highlights the fact that according to the fossil record, modern, highly intelligent humans seem to appear almost overnight around 200,000 years ago. This raises the question, how did we progress so quickly from primitive apes to highly advanced beings? Is it possible that another species deliberately manipulated our genetic code?
I'm Telly, Sam's mom.
I'm Ash.
They don't seem to want us around. Hey, what's the occasion?
You.
Why'd you change the picture?
I didn't change anything.
You replaced the book with an empty book. You erased our son.
They were always playing.
Sam! Sam! Sanford, did you know him? Where's my son?
Telly, you never had a son. Sometimes some people actually invent entire alternate lives with imagined friends and imagined families and children.
Stop it! Why are you doing this? I'm making him up!
I'm sorry, we know each other.
It's me.
Who are you?
Ash, please! You remember me?
We have never met. I do not know you.
Lauren and Sam were friends.
I never had a kid.
This was your daughter's room.
Wait! I remember!
Who could erase our lives? Who could do that? Please tell me no one will know that she spoke to us. I swear to you.
They're listening.
life on Earth, seeded from Mars? Could we, in fact, be Martians? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and suggest that this seeding of Earth may even have been a directed effort orchestrated by human-like beings that existed on the Red Planet. And they claim these extraterrestrial ancestors can be found in the apocryphal texts of the Hebrew Bible, represented as the fallen angels.
We know from ancient legend of the books of Enoch that there was a group of angels who descended to earth in violation of divine law. They introduced to humanity ways, means, knowledge, which we would understand today as science and technology. These angels were in human form. They were called in Hebrew Ishim, which means men. They looked just like us.
The fallen angels were giants. They were at least 10 feet tall, very striking to look at, enormous eyes, and no wings.
For over 100 years, mythologists have been contemplating this idea that the fallen angels came from Mars to Earth. Even Dante described this in the Paradiso. He called this the fifth level of heaven. Is it possible that the fallen angels came to Earth from Mars?
Could we reinterpret the story of fallen angels as beings not from heaven, but from Mars? Based on examination of the astronauts living in the International Space Station, scientists have speculated on what physiological changes might be seen in future generations of humans born on Mars. And ancient astronaut theorists suggest the resemblance to the description of fallen angels may be uncanny.
One of the most amazing things about the human body is its ability to adapt. And if you look at astronauts who go into space, they actually grow about 2 or 3 inches. And when you have a human that's born on Mars, what's going to happen is the environment will change the structure of the human body. And what you're going to see in a few generations is humans that are taller and skinnier because the gravity on Mars is less than that of Earth.
If humans evolved long enough on the planet Mars, they could grow to be taller, they'd have the bigger heads, they'd have the spindly limbs, they might actually grow slightly larger eyes that were equipped to see better in the dark because you simply have less sunlight on Mars than you do on the Earth because it's farther away from the sun. They could also end up looking like representations of angels and various other godlike beings that we've read about in the Bible and other ancient documents.
These attributes to somebody from a low-gravity planet like Mars or being in space for a long time may well be the attributes that we see of the fallen angels, being very tall and spindly and perhaps pale and with large eyes. Something that we might expect to be coming from another planet like Mars.